YouTube, Sandy Frank here. This week's episode of Hobby Talk, I wanted to talk about Pokemon. So there's a lot of people like really down on Pokemon because this new Sword and Shield block, not Sword and Shield, Scarlet and Violet block. This was the Sword and Shield block over here. The Scarlet and Violet block is just doesn't seem to have been received well. Where we're coming off of the Sword and Shield block, which was like the peak of Pokemon popularity, it seems like, maybe since the original Pokemon sets came out. And people are thinking, oh, Pokemon must be dead. I can assure you, guys, Pokemon is not dead. I'm getting ready to have my annual garage sale. And I can literally guarantee you every single person under 30 is going to ask if I have Pokemon. Because that's what happened last year. Everyone. Hey, do you have Pokemon? Do you have anything Pokemon? Do you have Pokemon cards? Do you have anything Pokemon I put in my garage sale was selling. Or people were asking about it. And it was a very successful garage sale because I had some bulk. I was selling bulk. I was selling Pokemon little keychains, Pokemon pins, Pokemon graded cards, Pokemon packs. I mean, it's crazy. And still, they would still ask, do you have Pokemon? There was a couple people asked about Yu-Gi-Oh! But card collecting games, people are fervent over. Especially anybody like 30 years of age or younger. So, that leads to my next point, and that is whenever you have something so universally loved by, this is now 30 years of, we won't count, definitely 25 years of people being passionate about Pokemon. There's going to be a lot of people that will always remember Pokemon fondly. Now I'm going to tell you about a thing. When I was a young man, maybe just out of high school, I loved going to auctions. And I would look for, me personally, I was looking for old Star Wars figures, baseball cards, Hot Wheels, stuff like that. Stuff that I was into. So, this particular auction, they had a bunch of marbles. Now, you might wonder, okay, marbles, that's interesting. And there's a lot of you probably don't even know what marbles are. Well, let me first explain what marbles are. Marbles were, I don't see them around very much anymore, but they were little glass balls, and you played a game called marbles with it. And this was a game that was played by generations before I was around. And you had big marbles, they were called shooters. And I think you drew a circle. Please put down in the comments if you understand what this game was. There was a big circle on the ground, and you had the small marbles in a circle, and you take your shooter marbles and shoot them with your thumb, I guess, or throw them and knock the small marbles out of the circle. And I guess if you knocked your opponent's marbles out of the circle, you won. So this was a game that was played, by generations that were before me. So at this auction, they were selling, they looked old to me. They looked like old marbles. And they were really cool. Marbles are made out of glass. They look like they're handmade marbles. So they were probably antique marbles. And at this auction, there was several old men. I'd say 60 to 70 to 80 years old. And they were bidding against each other for these, especially the shooter marbles, the big ones. And I was fascinated by this part of the auction. I could not believe how much these marbles were going for. And this was back when I was a young man. So this was many years ago. And I don't know what the marble market is now, but that day, and this is just a small town that this is not like New York City or some big auction place. It was basically a smaller town auction that happened to have some marbles that day. And these old gentlemen, they knew about it, and they were there for the marbles. And they bid on these old antique marbles, and the prices that those marbles were going for blew my mind. And that has always stuck with me because those marbles to those old men, that the reason they wanted those marbles, yeah, they probably collected them, but they collected things that brought them back to their childhood. This was a game they probably played as kids in the backyard or in the park or at school. It brought back those fond memories of youth. And men in particular, I'm sure there's some women as well, but men in particular, when they are later in life and have disposable income, and if they have that collecting gene inside them, I will say, not everyone wants to collect things, but they will want to seek out those things that bring them back to their childhood, bring them back those memories, those member berries of those years gone by. And that's why those marbles were worth so much money. And we're going for what I thought was crazy amounts because these guys were loving these marbles. And it was bringing them back to their young days, maybe in the schoolyard playing marbles. Guys, the marbles of this generation are Pokemon cards, is one of the things I'm trying to tell you. Video games and Pokemon cards. You know, other TCGs as well, but by far the most commonly requested item were Pokemon cards. There was baseball card people too, and I had some older packs of baseball cards out there, and they sold very well too. But they were more, the people buying the baseball cards were more, you know, people around my age or maybe 10, 20 years younger. There were some kids that were into the baseball cards, but mostly, if they were a young person, they were definitely, into the Pokemon. So, another thing I'm trying to tell you is Pokemon is going to be fine because this last 25 years that Pokemon has been out has been huge. Pokemon is now one of the biggest names out there. In Japan, it's even maybe 5 times as big, if you can believe that. Pokemon is a way of life in Japan, and it's big here too. Trust me, it is huge. And these young people, going back maybe 25-year, 30-year-old people to 5-year-old kids nowadays, when they're old men at an old auction somewhere, and they see graded Pokemon cards of some, of course, not just any of them, but the ones that they really wanted as a kid, like Charizard Hollows, the Moonbreon from Evolving Skies, a booster box of sealed Pokemon cards. What do you think these kids nowadays, when they're old and have disposable income and are wanting to rekindle that joy they had as kids, what do you think they're going to be turning to? I mean, it's not hard to see how Pokemon is going to be so huge in the future. When I was a kid, I'll even use me as an example. I loved collecting Hot Wheels. Hot Wheels were my marbles. I loved Hot Wheels. I loved my cars. I slept them underneath my bed. They were dear to me. And once I got older and had disposable income and wanted to collect, I definitely have a collecting bug, as you might realize. I was drawn back to Hot Wheels. And the only thing I can think of is that psychological bringing yourself back to those innocent days of youth where you were just like, oh, I love this car. And I wanted to get carded Hot Wheels. You know, carded means they're still in the package of some of those cars that my favorite cars as a kid that I didn't have anymore. They got lost, or other kids took them, or what happened to them. Got destroyed by crashing them and playing with them for hours and hours and hours. I had mint copies, basically, of those original Hot Wheels, and I loved collecting them. So Hot Wheels were my marbles. Kids nowadays, their marbles are definitely in the video game era. You know, who knows how that... There's people that collect video games, but really, they don't really sell video game cartridges anymore. It's more digital, so I don't know how that's going to translate someday. But definitely, people love playing Magic the Gathering. People love playing Pokemon. Especially the younger generation loves Pokemon. We've already seen Magic the Gathering really start to the original sets of Magic the Gathering are the most expensive TCG cards of all time. You see a guy like Post Malone paying $2 million for the One Ring. You know? Which we have one over here somewhere. I don't know where it went. But we have the One Ring, not the real one, but just a fun one that we can enjoy. But it's because for Post Malone, that's his marbles, is Magic the Gathering. And he wanted the ultimate Magic the Gathering card. So he paid whatever price that it was going to take to get that card. And since there was bounties out for over $1 million, he was going to have to pay up. And he did. And that is my lesson for today, guys. Look at what the young generation is into and think about what that means when they become these old men at auctions and having disposable income and wanting to recapture the joy of youth. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more videos later.
Oh, well, I can't touch and I cannot lie. You are the brothers I can't deny.